Well, thank you for joining another episode of Girl Talk with Alecia Tameko. This is a very important episode, very informative. It will be. This is the start. It will be the start of Endometriosis Awareness Month. And I have a very dear friend, and I don't call too many people my sister, but Sis is on the line, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself in just a moment. She's a licensed massage therapist. She advocates, when I say advocate, she advocates for people being empowered about endometriosis awareness, okay? Um, Not by all means, we are not medical professionals. These are strictly our experiences that we've endured along the way. So, coming to the mic is Michelle Johnson.
Hey, Alicia. Hey, how are you? Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Thank you for joining us. Now, I've kind of, told people a little bit about who you are, but you tell us, who you are and what you do.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, as you mentioned, my 9 to 5, so to speak, I am a licensed massage therapist and wellness educator for the past 17 years. I'm also, as you mentioned, a awareness advocate and educator for people suffering with endometriosis. I'm also the author of the endometriosis self-help book, Fighting Fiercely, Unveiling the Unknown about Endometriosis, and am the founder of the Fighting Fiercely Endometriosis Awareness Expo here in Chicago. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And let's just, get right into it. For those that don't know, because I'm still kind of clueless on some things, what
hmm
is what is endometriosis?
Sure. So thank you for asking that question. And you know that there are as many different definitions of endometriosis as there are websites and places claiming to be educational spaces for endometriosis. But an accurate definition of endometriosis is when tissue that is similar to the tissue that lines the uterus is found in other places in the body. And I have to be very clear in making that distinction. Endometriosis is not the uterine lining. It is not the normal tissue, which we call the endometrium. It is abnormal tissue that is similar, meaning that they have similar behaviors and functions, but the biology and the pathology of that abnormal tissue is very different, and it is found outside of the uterus. And I think that's an important distinction to make because a lot of times you'll see photographs and pictures about endometriosis being represented by a photo of a uterus, right? So
Mhm.
people tend to think that endometriosis is a reproductive disease or disorder, and it's not, when in fact endometriosis is a whole body disease, and it's actually been found in every major organ of the
Mhm.
body.
Exactly. Um, I know for me, I wasn't officially diagnosed, but I started experiencing symptoms when I was 17.
hmm
It was a very traumatic period of my life. I didn't get diagnosed to 2004, but at 17, I went to the ER with extreme pain. I had dropped to the floor and I did not understand. My family didn't understand what was going on. And the traumatic part for me, it wasn't the pain, it was that, oh, you just have an STD. And at that
Mm.
time, I was not sexually active or engaging in any sexual activities. So I'm telling them, and it was like, you can tell us the truth. You're lying, pretty much. So at
Mm.
17, you can only imagine, how traumatic that was for me. And I know there are a lot of people, when I speak with them that have endometriosis, they go undiagnosed because
Mhm.
it's never, you have the symptoms but they don't know how to diagnose it. So my
Mhm.
question to you is, how old were you when you got diagnosed with that, and what are some of the things that you experienced?
Yeah,
um
so for me, like you, I started having symptoms around 16, 17 or so. I started my cycle very early. I was 11 when I got my first period, and my symptoms were pretty much at the onset, right? But like you, like many people with this disease, I was kind of told, oh, you just have to get used to it. This is just part of being a woman. This is what happens. And so I had always had heavy bleeding, heavy cycles, around that time. But it wasn't until I was 33 that I officially had gotten diagnosed. And in my experience, I actually thought, or the doctors thought, that my appendix had ruptured.
Yep.
And so for me, like I said, my cycles had always been heavy, but there was a point when something shifted and they became even heavier. And I began to experience lots of clotting, and that was something
Yep.
that was new for me. I began to have very significant low back pain, um, so much so that I would get cramping in my rectum. And that was something that was like cramping and spasming. Those things were different. Those things were different. And so for a period of almost a month, I had high fever. I had excruciating pain in my back. And I went to the doctor and they thought that my appendix had ruptured. And so they sent me to the ER. And when I got to the ER after hours and hours of testing, they said, no, your appendix hasn't ruptured. You have endometriosis. And I was just kind of like, what is that? What does that mean? I was completely lost at that point.
And I know that some of the things entering my mind, I was 24 when I got diagnosed. And one of the questions was, well, how did I get it? Is this reversible?
Mm-hmm.
What can I do to change the diagnosis? Things like that. And I know I'm not alone in that. And I like that
Mm-hmm.
in your book, you talked about how it was a quote you said, you're not alone, you're not crazy. Um,
Mm-hmm. And what
what
you
you're
experiencing is not in
experiencing.
your head. Yeah.
And I think it's so that's one of the things over the years with the relationship we have that's never changed. And that's what kind of made me not so much as advocate, but be more aware and intentional on people's feelings who are dealing with the situation.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because um, people not understanding what the disease is or whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
um, they didn't believe me.
Yeah.
You're faking it. Nothing's wrong with you, and things like that. For you, what were some of the biggest challenges, or are the biggest challenges for you with dealing with endometriosis?
Well, for me, like you, my biggest challenge initially was just understanding what this disease was, what it meant. When I was first diagnosed, the way it was explained to me, and then years later, I realized it was totally inaccurate. But the way it was explained to me initially, and I talk about this in the book, was that it was a big ball of something in my body that didn't
Mhm,
belong, right? And
mhm,
they had me under the impression that I was going to have surgery. They were going to go in and take it out, and then everything would be fine. I wasn't, the words wasn't even spoken to me about no cure until after I had already had surgery. So that
mhm,
was the biggest challenge, just understanding what this disease meant for me, understanding and then processing that there is no cure, that even though I'd had this surgery, this disease would still have very significant effects on my life. And then the second biggest challenge, kind of like what you said, was getting friends and family to understand that, because like me, their first thought was, when you had surgery, they took all the bad stuff out. What is the problem? Why are you still sick? Why are you still
mhm.
laid up? Why are
Yeah.
you still saying that you're in pain? So those would be the two biggest challenges. Number one, understanding the diagnosis myself and trying to process what that means, and then trying to explain the diagnosis to other people and explaining the changes that were happening in my life as a result of that. Like you said, people, I never had anybody say to me that I was faking, but there was the implications that I was maybe over
Mhm.
exaggerating my symptoms, and, oh girl, we all get periods, it can't be that bad. So I would say those two were the biggest challenges, when I first got diagnosed.
I have to agree. And I know watching, your lives, listening to you and reading you advocate for, the diagnosis and things like that. One of the major things is that I guess because doctors still don't understand what it is, they're every day things are changing. But one
Hmm.
of the biggest things is do you want to get a hysterectomy? Do you,
Mm.
you know, it does cause infertility. Um, and a lot of, I know I experienced where they wouldn't do a hysterectomy because of my age, but
Mm-hmm.
at that time it may have been the best option for me, which I haven't gotten. Not a lot of people know, but I did recently, June of 2020, had both of my tubes removed
Mm-hmm.
because of what the disease had done to my body. Um, I know you also, you changed your lifestyle. How important is
Mm-hmm.
that? What type of things have you done to kind of make your life more healthier, shall we say?
Yeah, so we talk about this, no cure for this disease, but there are different ways to manage it, right? Manage
Mm-hmm.
your pain, and in every body, every woman is going to be different. But for most of us, I would say feel pretty confident in saying that most of us use some combination of
Mm-hmm.
therapies, right, to manage our pain. Obviously, we use traditional medicine and surgeries, use pharmaceutical prescriptions and medications and things. A lot of us use holistic approaches. With me being
Mm-hmm.
a massage therapy, I do try to incorporate more natural, holistic options. But I think for me, the biggest thing, the turning point for me came when, and you're probably no stranger to this, I was on so many different medications at one
Mm-hmm.
time. And just the side effects and just the effects that it was having on my body, my hair falling out, me gaining weight, me getting, severe acne, just all of these things. And I had just come to a point where I'm definitely not anti-medication. Like, I will grab a Vicodin in a minute if that's what I need, right? But
Mm-hmm.
on a day-to-day basis, I do want to try to manage it as medication-free as possible, right? So I've tried it all. I have tried different types of painkillers, medications, prescriptions. But on a more natural side, I have explored what they call the Endo diet or the anti-inflammatory diet, which is basically eliminating what we call trigger foods from the
Yep.
diets, foods that have been known to cause inflammation and pain in the body. For myself, I've eliminated dairy almost. I would say I'm like 90% dairy free. Cheese is that's what I struggle with, is the
Yeah.
cheese. But no milk, no yogurt, no sour cream, none of that. I have significantly cut down on my gluten intake, my wheat intake. I started introducing more things like I call myself a flexitarian, right? Because I do a little bit of raw, I do a little bit of vegan, I do a little
Mm-hmm.
vegetarian, but then sometimes I'll grab a burger if that's what I want, right? But for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's like all things in moderation. So I try to live by like the 80-20% rule, meaning 80% of the time I try to eat relatively healthy and relatively clean, as they say, but I do allow myself a little bit of grace, if I want to have a cookie or a brownie or, something
Mm-hmm.
along those lines. But I encourage people to just explore it all. I've done CBD products. That was a huge, huge help for me. But I
Mm-hmm.
just encourage people to, the biggest thing for me, do your research. Um, I'm a big fan of keeping a journal. The
Mm-hmm.
methods that I'm trying, how long am I trying it, what results am I seeing, what results am I not seeing. But I think the biggest one for me was food, because now I know what my trigger foods are, right? And I know that if you break down, girl, and have this ice cream, be prepared to grab the ibuprofen later, because you already know what this is, right?
Yep.
But that, I think the biggest improvement for me came in modifying the
Yep.
things that I eat. I think modifying, but there's some women who are very strict vegans and
Yep.
still have awful pain. And that's why I say this
Definitely.
isn't a one size fits all. It's very much exploratory. It's very much trial and error, and some things that work for a while might not
No
work. Do
work
you know what I
anymore.
mean?
Yeah.
Um, like, I'm at a place now where we know birth control doesn't stop the disease, right? But it
Yeah.
can help to provide hormonal balance, right?
Yep.
And I've been on a particular birth control for, gosh, 10, 11 years, and it worked amazingly for me. But now it's giving me issues with my blood pressure. It's
Mm-hmm.
keeping my blood pressure high. And so now I'm looking at either changing or coming off of the birth control altogether. It was amazing for over a decade, right?
Mhm.
But your body changes, things change, and so um, it's continual. It's
Mhm.
ongoing in trying to figure out the options that are going to be best for you at any given time.
Exactly. And a few things I want to touch on that you spoke about. The journaling. I've never been good at that, but I want to tell the listeners out there to definitely pay attention to the things that you're eating. Like for me, I used to love tea, sweet tea. But if it's caffeinated, I learned I can't have caffeine. It was a
Hmm.
big trigger for me. I love bananas. I can't eat bananas anymore.
Really?
Yes,
Okay.
very horrible. And I'm like, every time it was a change for me. But as you said, as the disease progresses and you get older as well, things definitely change. What you used to eat may not bother you anymore, and then it does. The one of the other things is I didn't learn until recently, maybe a few years back, about the stages of endometriosis. There's
Hmm.
4 levels to it. I'm a stage 4. And I'm
Hmm.
like, I was like, what does that mean? Some people can be at a stage 4 and have no pain whatsoever.
Hmm.
Whereas they could be at stage 1 and be in the most excruciating pain. Can you touch on that a little bit from your experiences or what you've learned about those stages?
Yeah, so stages, I was also diagnosed as a stage 4. And like you talked about, it's really kind of, I don't want to say a sensitive topic, but a very hot topic, I guess you might say,
Mm-hmm.
because doctors have used that for years, but now they're coming to a place where some doctors are moving away from the staging,
Mm-hmm.
because like you said, the staging doesn't necessarily correlate to the amount of pain. And from what I've learned about staging is that the staging primarily refers to the amount or the severity of the disease present
Mm-hmm.
in the body. So, stage 1 is relatively mild disease, it's maybe in just a couple places in the body. Stage 4, for example, like in my case, it's very much spread throughout the pelvic cavity and surrounding outside of the reproductive organs. Like you, I lost my left ovary and left tube just because the disease had just ate through it. For me, it had kind of woven like in between a lot of my joints and ligaments. And so there
Mm-hmm.
were spaces in my first surgery that the doctor didn't go because they didn't want to risk severing a nerve or making me paralyzed. And so they just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like left it there, because they weren't um, the level of expertise. They couldn't do it successfully and they didn't want to risk any more damage. But that's pretty much what we mean when we talk about staging. It's like how severe is the disease. And then when you talked about too, somebody could have stage 1 and be in a lot of pain. It also depends where in the
Yep.
body it is. So you're right. If you can have one spot of endometriosis, right? But if that spot is like, say, on your lungs, it's going to give you some significant amount
Mm-hmm.
of problems there, right? So that's what I've learned about staging. But I was diagnosed as a severe stage 4 as well. In fact, my specialist told me that my case was one of the worst cases that they had ever seen. It was everywhere.
Yeah, I was told the exact same thing. Um, Also, for me being as young as I was and getting diagnosed with that, and for people, I know that they ask, well, how are you diagnosed? It's different for everyone, but initially, from what I've learned, is that they go in laparoscopically. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and they make 5 small incisions in your abdomen and use a camera or whatnot to kind of look around to see where the scar tissue is and things of that nature. That's what it
Mm-hmm.
was for me. Also, I wanted to bring up the stages because, again, me being young, when they said stage 4, I'm thinking cancer.
Right,
Oh, oh
right.
my gosh, I have cancer. And that was not the case. Um,
Mm-hmm.
one is not, I'm not going to say one is not connected to the other, but that is not what that means. So, again, for those that are out there and have been diagnosed or wondering if they have it, that is not what it means whatsoever. Um, what was I don't want to say pivotal, but what was your experience that led to you wanting to advocate and speak more and educate people about endometriosis?
Yeah. So, first of all, I never wanted to do it. That's number one. Especially those first couple, I would say the first 3 years was really a journey about me learning and educating myself. I
Mhm.
realized at that time the team of doctors didn't know much about it. I would say that I was blessed in that my first surgery, it was with a specialist, right?
Mhm.
She actually, come to find out later, she did a very good job in removing the bulk of the disease, but the aftercare team, right, the people that I
Mhm.
was discharged to for my follow-up care, they
Mhm.
didn't really know what they were doing. They didn't know, much of anything. And there came a point where they literally said to me, we don't know what else to do with you. And so
Mhm.
those first couple of years was about me researching and learning and educating myself. And again, like we talked about earlier, that kind of turned into me educating my friends and my family, right?
Mhm.
And I found myself where I was literally repeating the same story over and over and
Yeah.
over to
Mhm.
people. And it became, to be quite honest, it became very triggering because it was like I was reliving all of that stuff every time I had to tell somebody else's story, every time I had to say it again. And so initially my thought was, you know what, I'm just going to bring everybody together. We're going to have a sit down. And I'm just going to tell everybody at once. And it
Mhm.
started from there. And then one of my friends said to me, I had no idea. And if you didn't know and I didn't know, how many other people might not know, how many other people might be suffering with this and don't know about it. And
Mhm.
so it just kind of went from like my living room to me renting an office building in this
Mhm.
office within the space that I was working. I had picked up some contract work at a hospital. So I reached out to some of the nurses, reached out to some of the doctors there, and just said, hey, can you kind of come and explain this, right, from a
Mhm.
professional perspective? Because my people don't believe me, what I'm saying.
Yep.
And I
Mhm.
don't fully have the language to explain this in a way that people can understand. And so it started off on a very small scale. But what I realized was that the more I started sharing, the more other people started showing up saying, yes, I deal with this too, or I had this problem, or my sister has this problem, or my cousin
Mhm.
has this problem. And I know that people use this word a lot, but it truly did happen organically where it just started growing. And again, as a result of me seeking support in the online spaces, which is how you and I met, reaching
Yes.
out to other women saying, yes, I have this same story. And I just put out a call and said, hey, I'm having this get together. I'm bringing some people together, some experts to talk about endo. Would anybody be open enough to come and
Mhm.
share their story or come and get some information? And it just kind of grew from there. And,
Mhm.
next thing I know, a friend is telling a friend, and somebody's in my inbox or somebody's sending me an email. And,
Mhm.
um, and next thing, and I'm advocating,
Mhm.
and I'm, and it kind of went from there.
What? Okay, so I know there are some people out there, and your journey has been amazing. You know,
Thanks.
very educational and informative. But there are people out there that are still confused
Hmm.
as to what their symptoms are, being told nothing's wrong with them, and things like that. What would you say are some of the key questions with that initial visit? They haven't gotten to, oh, they may have to have surgery,
Right,
to get
right.
diagnosed. What are those initial questions
Oh, excuse
that
me.
they should be asking their doctor or specialist? And that's, I know you said that that's very important as well.
Yes, yeah. So let's talk about that piece first, if I can. So yes, there's a difference between an endometriosis specialist and your OB/GYN or your primary care doctor. And unfortunately, the majority of women are diagnosed by a primary care doctor or OB, or they go to a OB/GYN or primary care for those initial questions. And they're really speaking with people who don't have the knowledge, who don't have the understanding, who don't have the ability to accurately speak to those symptoms. And so
Mhm.
that's the first thing that you got to understand. And before now, right? Before now, there really wasn't a credentialing process. There wasn't a certification or anything that said endo specialist, right? It was just kind of word of mouth within the
Mhm.
community of doctors that women had gone through. But an endometriosis specialist is someone who specializes in where 50% or more of their practice is solely dedicated to treating and educating
Mhm.
about endometriosis. Not an OB-GYN that delivers babies all day and then comes and does one or two surgeries. In my research, that's kind of the layman's criteria, is that at least
Mhm.
50% or more of their practice is dedicated to endo surgeries, endo education, endo research.
Mhm.
Now there is a new platform, and I'm not a paid sponsor or anything. I just really support this platform, but it's called I Care Better. And they have developed a credentialing process of sorts, a vetting process to list particular criteria for registering someone as an endometriosis specialist. And so, if you guys want to check that out, it's icarebetter.com. They have a Facebook page, and you can go to the website and see what that vetting process is and see how they categorize their specialists.
Mhm.
That being said, it is so difficult to know what questions to ask, because the thing about endometriosis is the symptoms of endo mimic so many other similar conditions. And so that's the hardest
Yeah.
part. But my recommendation in terms of the questions to ask is that if, and then this goes back to journaling, and I know you said you don't journal, but a symptom journal is what helped me,
Okay.
because normally, you get your cycle every, what is it, 23 to
And
28 days or
18
something like
days.
that.
Mhm.
And for me, one of the key triggers when I noticed my periods went from about 24 days to 21 days, then they were coming every 14 days. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I'm talking about full on periods, right? Not spotted,
Mhm.
full blown cycles. And so one of the key things that they say is if you are having a period, number one, that you are bleeding through a pad or a tampon in less than an hour, if you are passing really heavy blood clots, if your cycles are preventing you from what we call daily life activities, going to work, going to school, socializing, if you're
Mhm.
bleeding through your clothes, if your pain is not controlled with like over the counter medications,
Mhm.
those are key things to look for. And it's sad that, we have mammograms for breast cancer, we have pap smears for cervical cancer, but there is no test for endometriosis. And so, one of the questions that I would ask my doctor, you know, and it's best to go in kind of like with your support, your data. Hey, for the past 6 months, I've been having periods that are coming every 23 days. I'm
Mhm.
bleeding through my clothes. Certain food, makes it worse. It's not being controlled with over the counter medications. XYZ has been ruled out. Would you consider a laparoscopic procedure to confirm endometriosis, right?
Mhm.
Like you said, there are dozens of different ways. Typically speaking, they say you can't see endometriosis on an MRI. You can't see
Mhm.
it through an ultrasound. What you can see are abnormalities,
Yep.
right, on the ultrasound. But again, because those abnormalities could be so many other different things, the only way to truly diagnose it is to get the laparoscopic procedure. And a lot of times, based on your symptoms, what your doctors will want to do, a lot of doctors, is start giving you drugs. They'll want to
Mhm.
put you on Lupron or put you on Orlith or put you on birth control. And I would really strongly advocate to say, hey, 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 how are you going to start treating me for something we don't know what
Yes.
this is? Don't treat me for something that's suspected. Let's do the
Mhm.
procedure so that we can confirm it. The problem is a lot of OB-GYNs default to medications because they don't know what to look for. A lot of times, and you've heard the countless stories, right, of
Yes.
women in the support group. My OB-GYN said that there was nothing there, and I
Yep.
went to a specialist a year later and my body was riddled with disease.
Yes.
So I would just, that would be my, get your symptom journal together and just simply ask, based on these 3 months or 6 months worth of symptoms, I think this could be an issue. I would like to confirm this or not. And you may have to be, not may, you'll likely have to be very assertive,
Mhm.
stand your ground, because like you said, a lot of doctors will try to downplay it, ask you about STDs. I remember you talked about that, and I had a similar experience where this doctor was trying to force a diagnosis of PID on me, pelvic inflammatory
Mhm.
disease.
Yep.
And one of the first questions he asked, and this was very insulting to me, was how many partners do you,
Yes.
not if you're having sex, number one, not if you're active, not who's your, but how many. Like he just jumped to how many. And
Yeah.
like you, At that time, I was practicing abstinence, so there were no partners. But he repeatedly kept asking me that, trying to make my diagnosis be something other than what it was. So I would hold your ground, ask those questions, and really push for that definitive diagnosis, because you don't want to be start putting stuff in your body to treat something that you haven't even been confirmed as to if you have it or not.
I agree. And it was so important for me to inform the audience of the disease and make them more aware that again they're not alone because of the experience that both of us have shared. For me, it was just taking different medications. I'm not a advocate for. I do not like
Mm-hmm.
over the counter. I don't like medicines or whatnot. But that's how excruciating the pain had become. For me, most recently, I'm now 40. Again, I was diagnosed. I started experiencing these pains when I was 17. Didn't get diagnosed until I was 24. So
Mm-hmm.
you guys do the math. But with that being said, I was left on medications that I wasn't supposed to be on for long periods of time, and they will force those upon you because they're trained to do what they're supposed to be doing, you know. Um, but one of the medications recently has now caused osteoporosis. I'm
Mm-hmm.
40 now, and that's another issue on top of an issue,
Mm-hmm.
along with, and I never say it correctly, and you always correct me, adenomyosis.
Mm-hmm. Adenomyosis. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So now they're saying that I don't have endometriosis anymore. Now I have adenomyosis, experiencing the again the osteoporosis and other ailments. But what I learned was I had to start advocating for myself, because my friends and family didn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand. So, like I said, I'm still learning from that. How is it there's people that are against the wall? And I want to make people aware as well. There are people that get so down and depressed by this disease because they're not getting their questions answered. They're tired of being in pain. They're in relationships where they don't have that support,
Mm-hmm.
and they're taking their lives. That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
So for those people that don't know how to self advocate, or they feel like self advocating is not, working for them, do you have any suggestions on the next steps that they can possibly take?
You know, that is such a difficult question. Number one, let me just say, I do understand that, because I talk about in the book, I was so suicidal when I was
Mm-hmm.
going through my treatment. So I know what that's like. And what people don't understand about this disease, it doesn't just affect you mentally. It
Mm-hmm.
does affect you emotionally. It does affect you mentally. It does affect you sexually. It does affect you financially. You know,
Yes.
there have been people whose husbands, whose wives, whose spouses have left them because of this
Mm-hmm.
disease. A lot of the procedures and treatments for these. For this disease is not covered by medication.
Yeah.
So a lot of times you're in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. A lot of people in these really small towns where there are no specialists, they have to travel to California, to New York, to the
Mm-hmm.
CDC in Atlanta for treatment. So now we're talking airfare, travel fare, hotel fare, child care for my kids if I need to. Now I got to take time off. So this impacts us a lot. And I know what it feels like to want to give up and
Mm-hmm.
to just want it to be over. And speaking from my own experience, I say that people and I am people, right? Who get to a place where they think about suicide, where they contemplate suicide. And at least for me, it wasn't that I necessarily wanted to die per se, like to not
Mm-hmm.
be alive anymore. I just wanted the pain
And to
and all
go.
of the hardship to stop. I
Yeah.
just wanted it to go away, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And that is a hard question, because if you don't have the support, or you don't have the voice, or you don't know how to reach out, it can be very scary. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, when I was in that dark place, and this is where the internet became a lifesaver, a literal lifesaver for me, because those times when I was up at 3 in the morning, and I couldn't call my mother, because, like you said, they don't understand. Like, they can only give so much support for something they don't get. I could log onto the internet and I could go to an endometriosis online support group, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody somewhere at 3 in the morning, even if they were on the other side of the world, would be there and I could talk to them. I could vent to them. I could type it out. I could talk it out. And my advice would be to, even if you're afraid, to just reach out, because sometimes we don't need advice. We just need to be heard. And I make myself available, to people who reach out to me, and I'll say, you can DM me, you can email me, because sometimes all it takes is for somebody to pull us off the ledge, is just to listen, is to
Yeah.
validate somebody, to say, I hear you and I believe you. That's
Yeah.
it. No, girl, you shouldn't. There's a time and place for that, but sometimes it's just, I hear you and I believe you. That's it. That's all. If that's all you can do, just to log on and pick up that phone, to log in and say, hey, I'm really going through it. Is anybody out there? Can somebody talk to me? Like that. That
Mm-hmm.
really helped me
Means a lot.
when I was down. And I know that, and I don't know if they do this anymore, but years ago, when I was first diagnosed, a lot of groups used to have what they call yellow mail, where they would do email exchanges, and they would exchange
Mm-hmm.
addresses, and they would just send cards or letters or notes of encouragement. And those really, like, I got stuff from Norway, from Finland, from Mexico, from
Mm-hmm.
Germany, and just it just gave you a sense of belonging, and to, like
Yep.
you said, to know you are not alone, and just to have a stranger from the other side of the world, say, I care about what you're going through. You got this. It's going to be okay. And to this day, I have a box of all of those letters, and some of them aren't even open because they were coming in so many at one time.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say, and especially now with the pandemic, everybody's connected, Zoom, social media. If it's
Mm-hmm.
all you can do, just to log on and look into a support group and just say, help me.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody will reach out. Somebody will be there, and you can reach out to me. I remember there's a young lady. I've never met her, Alicia. I
Mm-hmm.
promise you, we communicated by Facebook Messenger for about a year and a half. Somebody told her about me, and I literally walked her through each step of finding a specialist,
Mm-hmm.
get diagnosis, a couple of surgeries, problems with her boyfriend, and I will be honest, there were times when I was like, girl, it's 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to go to bed. But that was when the realization came that this is the work. This is advocacy,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just about sharing Instagram stories and making posts. This is getting down in it, in the
Mm-hmm.
trenches, And what kept me going was that I remember how I felt, because I didn't have nobody I could DM. I didn't have anybody I
Mm-hmm.
could call. So I said, let me wipe this sleep out of my eye. Let me get up and talk to this sister, because I know what that feels like, to be on the ledge. My boyfriend's about to leave me. He don't want me no more because I can't do it the way he want to. And I lost my job because I had to keep calling off because I kept bleeding through my clothes. So
Yep.
I know what that is like, and which is why I make myself available. And I tell people, give me grace, have some patience. Sometimes I don't get back to you that day or in that minute, but I will get back to you. And so if all you have in you is to just type, help me, hey, you know, that's when those support groups can really, really, truly become a lifeline, because it is simply a community of other women and other people who know what you're going through.
Exactly. And I really, one thing about Michelle, and I can say, as I stated at the beginning when we started, who she who she is right now is who she's been through the whole time in the years that I've known her. She may not answer right away, but she has some type of solution, or answering the questions, directing me and others in the groups or whatnot from purely from her experiences. And she makes it known, I am not a medical professional. These alone are my experiences, and this is what has worked for me and what I've seen work for others. I love that you go ahead. I'll
I was
go
just gonna
ahead.
say, and if I don't have the answer, I'll point you to somebody who does, or say,
Definitely,
hey, I don't know, but check this group, check that doctor, check this person,
definitely.
and like you said, I'm by no means an expert, but I am 12 years in,
Mhm.
into this journey. And so I thank you for that. I really appreciate that. That means a lot coming from you.
It does, because I was at the point where I was at that stage of my life where I was suicidal, and no one understood. Although I would never do it, but I just wanted the pain to go away. I wanted to stop hurting. I wanted to stop going to the doctor and rushing to the ER, and they could find nothing wrong and just pumping me with, narcotics or
Mm-hmm.
whatnot. And I didn't have a support system at the time because they didn't understand it either. I'm just like, my insides hurt, you know. For me, it wasn't, you know, I didn't have the regular symptoms that everyone had. So which made it even more difficult to explain to everyone each time. But why you at the ER? Oh, my insides, my reproductive system, all this other stuff. But I don't know if I ever shared that with you, and if I haven't, I'm sharing it with you now. That saved me by being able to speak with you, even when you had your event, and being able to be a vendor there and getting educated even further with the panelists and things like that. And it was just so important when I reached out to you anyway, that you said that, Endometriosis Awareness Month is important, but at the end of the day, guess what? It's 365 days of the
Mm-hmm.
year that we deal with this. So again, this is to bring awareness to those people so that you don't continue to feel alone, to let you know that there are people out there that are going through some of the similar situations that you're going through. Um, and I'm just going to end it there. Do you have anything else to share with us? And where can they find you on social media?
Yeah, well, I just want to say you this was a perfect place to end it. Like you said, for us, endometriosis awareness is 365 days a year. It is all year long. But I am so grateful for you, during this month of March for taking the time out to shine a light on it, and to bring awareness, um, for people who may not have ever heard of this disease, or people who think they may have it, or people who've been diagnosed and just need some help navigating how to have a good quality of life with this disease. And so again, I thank you for having me. I would like to wrap it up by just saying that, if you guys are interested in my book, Fighting Fiercely, Unveiling the Unknown About Endometriosis, it's part self-help, it's part my story, it's part advocate and resource manual. It is available in both paperback and ebook on Amazon.com. You can find it there. And I'm on social media. I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Fight Fierce Endo. You can find me on Facebook at Fighting Fiercely. Check out my YouTube channel. If you guys do the keyword search Fighting Fiercely, I have a ton of videos from all kinds of topics about education. I have a little fun little segment on there that called Endo Eats, where I talk about foods that are what I call endo friendly foods. And
Mhm.
I even have a segment where I talk about the endo diet and how you can kind of change your diet to help manage your symptoms. And if I could just do a little shameless plug, for my second book, F Your Feelings. uh, Sometimes we can fail and fall right into our divine purpose. And this book actually touches on what you talked about, Alicia, about how my very painful journey with endometriosis actually led me into my purpose of advocating and being an advocate. And that has grown not just for endometriosis, but now I've expanded that into the wider range of chronic illness and disability community awareness as well. So yeah, as I mentioned, feel free to, DM me. You can email me at fightingfiercely@gmail.com. If you guys want to check out the website to see past clips and things from past expos, see some of the other videos and things that I've done, you can check that out at fightingfiercely.com.
Thank you so much. I know people say it a lot, but this will definitely not be the last time that you hear from Michelle. There's so much more to share, so many things that she's doing right now, and we can talk on that further. But again, thank you guys for listening, and until next time, love you always.